SBJ I Factor is presented by Allied Sports, a new agency model built to lead modern marketers in the shift from sponsor to storyteller.
College athlete, Olympic medalist, global sports marketer, and SBJ 40 under 40 honoree. Very few can claim a connection to each of those impressive attributes, but Kate Johnson certainly and proudly can. From the University of Michigan to a silver medalist at the Summer Games in Athens to top marketing roles at Visa and now at Google, Kate Johnson has quite the resume. And she was also named to SBJ's 40 under 40 class in 2017 and joins us on SBJ's I Factor. Kate, great to see you. Welcome.
Hi, Abe. Great to be here.
We start the I Factor like we always do about your youth and how that your youth influenced your life and how you grew up. I believe you were born in Denver, so talk a little bit about your early days.
My youth. Yeah, so I was born in Denver. I grew up actually, though, in Vail, Colorado, and then Portland, Oregon, and Marin County, California. So really 3 locations, but certainly being born in a mountain town had an impact on me. My claim to fame is I went to preschool with Toby Dawson, and ran in the same little friend school circle with Sarah Schlepper as well. So we actually had 3 Olympians kind of in our mini little 9-person friend group as young kids. And, I went back after the 2004 Olympics to Vail, and they had like a mini parade. And I think I was one of the first summer Olympians to come out of Vail, Colorado. So grew up there until I was, 5 and then moved to Marin County, California, which is really where, I kind of found my sports niche, in swimming in particular.
Let's talk about the role sports played in your youth and how it's impacted you in your personal and professional journey.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of I have a 13-year-old son right now who's in middle school. And so I'm really kind of thinking back to that time in my life where I knew I wanted to find something I was good at. I was good at swimming. I didn't love swimming. My family moved to Portland, Oregon when I was a freshman in high school. And I remember deciding, okay, I'm going to find this thing. I don't think it's going to be swimming. I had to make a decision. Did I want to really focus on that or find something else? And my dad had always talked about rowing, moving to Portland, a new high school, trying to find new connections to friends. We were driving over the Willamette River one day. I looked down, I saw a bunch of long, skinny boats on the river. And it was the difference for me was going down to a boathouse, meeting a coach, hopping on an erg, him saying, hey, I think you're going to be great at this. That was kind of all the difference for me. Having a coach that kind of reinforced, I think you could be good at this thing that I'd been hearing about from my dad, that I'd been hearing about from some of my friends' older siblings who had done some rowing, and then to have actually been able to try it on and say, okay, I think this is going to be it. And the thing I always say about rowing is, from the moment I actually got to go into a boat and feel what that felt like, I mean, I was hooked.
Is that right?
And with athletes talk about that, like getting hooked on something and knowing this is the thing I want to invest in, happens for people. I mean, I knew at that moment it was my morning, it was my evening, it was the first thing I thought about when I woke up, etc.
And so how did that translate from Oregon to the University of Michigan, where I believe you studied poli-sci?
I did. So I was a part of the first ever kind of junior rowing program in Portland. We recruited kids from all over the country, but then during the summers, I was rowing on the junior national team. I was getting to travel abroad to Scotland, to Poland, and racing at the Junior World Championships. I was the top recruit in the country for my year, and really had a choice to make when I was getting recruited to these colleges. It was, do I want to go and step into, a fabled history? Rowing has long existed in the Ivy Leagues at University of Washington, Cal, or do I want to go and be a part of creating a history? And so at the time I was kind of debating, do I want to go the Ivy League route? Do I want to go to the Michigan route? My last recruiting trip was to Michigan, and where they got me was just in, you come here and we will give you all the support you need to build this thing that you want to build, which was one of the top women's rowing programs in the country. So that's how I ended up at Michigan, and it was an exceptional experience.
Obviously, like you just said, a positive experience in Ann Arbor, and certainly a number of sports business executives, of course, are alma mater, or of course went to Michigan. So a strong group of a sports business kind of heritage there.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm on it's the sports business management
Right.
program at the University of Michigan, which is an incredible advisory board of, my peers and others out in the marketplace. And I go back for those meetings, and that is when the impact of going to that university really lands, when you just realize like some of the leaders in our industry came from this school. And here we all are in one room talking shop. It's pretty special.
It's an amazing group. I would agree. It's very, I would say, inspirational and for the young people who go there and can learn from the likes of you and others, pretty powerful. So talk about the discipline, though, to be in college, a very competitive academic environment at Michigan, but stay focused on your athletics and translate that into the Olympics.
This is what I'm again teaching my 13-year-old right now, just to bring it full circle, is that the reason why sport is so incredible on on a young person, but also even translating into university, is the structure it gives you. So for me, in high school, in university, having the structure of, I only have a narrow window of time to get everything done that I want to get done in a day, while also being a part of something that was bigger than my academics. It was about building something, being a part of a team, having a goal that we were all working backwards from in order to accomplish NCAA championships. You translate that into exactly what my bigger ambition was, which was to go to the Olympics one day in sport. And you've got all the foundations for what ultimately has set me up for success in the rest of my life, which is, set your sights on the prize, set the goals, work backwards from it, put the infrastructure in place around you to make those things happen, whether that be hiring a team or actually, writing a training program to get you to the Olympic Games. It's all very similar.
Incredible positivity and, I would say, determination and discipline while you were training for the Olympics. Did you ever think you'd work in sports one day?
I didn't. My senior year at Michigan, I remember thinking, and this definitely is something I talk about pretty regularly. Like it was not lost on me that a lot of athletes, when they move into the professional realm, it becomes their entire life. In university, I had my academics, I had sport, but moving into full-time training for the Olympics, there was this part of me that was like, okay, well, I've got to think about what I want to do when I'm done being a professional athlete. And I don't think athletes can think about that soon enough. I mean, there's ways to get experience, but as you and I both know, like having that experience, you need that in order to translate into career. And so, at the time, actually, I'd reached out to a company that I always really loved, Title IX Sports, which was, founded by an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to be tied to sport in some way. I think that the things that I'd set out for myself was, what do I love about sport that I want to keep in my career? It was, I knew I wanted to be a part of a team and keep that tenet in my work and carry that through from sport. I knew I wanted more project-led work, like having a goal that we all worked towards as a team. And then I frankly just wanted to keep traveling the world. I mean, sport gave me the world. I mean, I was 13 when I went to Poznan, Poland for the first time as a junior rower.
Right.
And so, for me, being able to translate sport into, and those tenets into like career, being able to live and work abroad in London with IMG, in Toronto, go to all the Olympic Games, except for basically Tokyo 2021. That's what this career has been. It's been exceptional.
Well, I'm not going to let you gloss over your Olympic experience, but talk about that in terms of what that meant, because there's a great photo you sent us. I believe you were with your parents there, and you could just see the joy, and winning a medal had to be just an unbelievable, I would say, sense of accomplishment and just really powerful.
It was, I think, and I think a lot of athletes would share this. It's not, everyone always asks you what's your most memorable moment from the Olympic Games, and you would think that it would be standing on the podium. I mean, on the podium, I was like trying to wake myself up. I felt like I was in a bit of a haze.
Huh.
For me, when I think back on my Olympic career, it was actually 3 months before the Olympic Games where I had a moment where I realized, after a very hard year of like having broken my eighth rib 8 times, come back from, rehab, not really sure if I was going to make the Olympic team. I pulled out all the stops. I did a lot of mental preparation around making the team. At one moment it really looked like I was on the outs of being able to make the 8-woman crew. And so I decided at that point how did I want to go out in this moment. And for me, it was I wanted to go out having fun. Whether I made it or not, I wanted to kind of end this career having had fun doing the thing that I loved. And so I really I ended up picking a word that I wanted to define me, which was relentless. And from that moment on, I ate relentlessly, I slept relentlessly, I rode relentlessly. That translated into, really this practice of visualizing what you want to be at the end of the day. I wanted to be in the Olympic women's 8. And so I just started behaving in that way. And then, the moment for me that I think back on was when my coach was launching us for the Olympic final, and he goes down the boat, he shakes everybody's hand as we launch. And as he shakes my hand, he's like, Kate, you were absolutely relentless this year. You earned every square inch of the seat you're sitting on. That was my moment where it was like, okay, I'm back. I'm here. I've made it. I've arrived. And, I largely did it on my own. So
That is awesome. I love that. I would say just how you were able to not just turn it on, because I knew it took, but you really focused on that word, and that kept you going throughout it. And it's something that we should go back to, because I'm sure it's probably served you well throughout your career post being an Olympic athlete, because there's a story. You and I have a mutual friend. He hired you, I believe, at IMG. He saw you run a trip by, I think it was called Back Roads. I think they do bike trips or something. And he said those trips are all politics and problem solving. And watching you, he said, I knew she could handle anything. And so he hired you at IMG.
Yeah, he did. Doug was like a long storied executive at IMG. When he hired me, both having the Olympic background, but then also him having been he went on these backroads trips regularly, knowing what it takes to be a leader on one of those trips and the amount of problem solving you have to do. And it absolutely translated into my career. And a lot of what we bonded around in my first 6 months with him in having started this career was around just taking risks. And kind of, he was wonderful because he would say, hey, Kate, go sit in every brainstorm you can get yourself into. And as you can imagine, at that time, walking the floor at IMG, you had everyone from like Maria Sharapova having a meeting about her future with the company through to, Olympic consulting, with Christina Schaefer and Rob Prasmark. And so, that's kind of how I didn't know what I wanted to be doing when I got to IMG. It was really starting at the bottom, an assistant to Doug Perney, and then working my way up. But how I did that was loaning myself out to brainstorms and hearing about what this company was involved in, and then kind of picking, okay, that's where I'm going to set my focus. And for me, it was Olympic consulting. It kind of married all my worlds. And Doug was amazing about just saying, go, run. You just keep leaning into those things. And, basically I worked my way out of that job into another job.
I tell people all the time that agency work is a really great training ground. Now, when you get into IMG Consulting, or we got into IMG, and like you said, you kind of listened and watched and observed a lot of different departments. What struck you about being at an agency? What did it teach you?
Yeah, I always say I got like my sports marketing MBA at IMG just because there was that ability to learn. What I loved about it was learning so many different brands. You were never on just, maybe I'd be on the Verizon account for a couple of years, but I'd also, there were certain structures where you could be on multiple client accounts. So actually going, somewhat deep in learning a company's business and being in the consulting side of helping that company figure out how to marry these rights that they'd secured through a sponsorship or otherwise into their business. That was fun because I actually had to learn, okay, what is Johnson and Johnson's, goal with this partnership? What is the ROI they need to see? How do we bring this to life for them? And then being able to be the expert on the sports side to say, and actually there was a moment per the brainstorm comment I made where I was sitting around a table. It was early days. I wasn't even on the Johnson and Johnson account yet. And as an Olympic athlete, they were brainstorming ideas on like, what should we do in the athlete village? And I offered up this idea about a bracelet. And the concept was that we would give, J&J would give every single Olympic athlete 2 bracelets, one for them to wear and then one for them to give to someone who'd supported them on their journey. And that came out of this idea that I had sitting in a brainstorm session where I could kind of give them the insight of like, what would matter to an athlete when you're in the athlete village? How do you engage with other athletes? How do you engage with the people that supported you on your journey? And that really became this beautiful moment for J&J at the Beijing 2008 Olympics. So,
I love that because there's a lot there. There's problem solving, it's creativity,
yeah.
there's a lot of thought that goes into this, and it's understanding, like you said, just different businesses, because you touched so many different clients. And then you left the agency world, and I know that you went to Visa, I believe around 2013, and became global head of sponsorship, and I think in 15. But how was it different working specifically for a brand, Visa, that had unbelievably a large sports portfolio of some of the biggest clients in sports?
Yeah. Going from, I feel like what I would say is going a couple layers deep on the agency side with clients to then going brand side and my job was to know Visa inside and out and to understand what, as a payment network, we wanted to do with these things, what it meant to be like the exclusive payment provider at an Olympic Games. What did that mean to Visa's bottom line? What were they trying to achieve with kind of a contractual term like that? Learning the ins and outs of a corporation and how, in Visa's case, it really built its global brand off the back of the a 30 plus year relationship with the Olympic movement. It's what allowed them to connect across markets, their brand story. And so to like have that be in the ether of a company like Visa, where people that even were recruited to come work there knew about it being an Olympic sponsor, and it carried kind of that weight and that tenor of like pride for employees who didn't even work on the sponsorships. That was a really special thing. The one thing I would say though, as I kind of transitioned client side too, was also learning about, even in promotions, as you rise in your career, there's a different path, I think, agency to brand as well. And one of the things that happened when I was at Visa was my boss was moving on, and he'd created this a VP role. And here I was seeing a lot of different gentlemen from the industry kind of come in, who actually I'd kind of thought of as my peers, go for this job that was now going to be my new boss. And I thought to myself, like, well, why am I not going for this? And I'd heard this quote that women are 50% likely to go for a job that they're 90% qualified for, whereas men are 90% likely to go for a job they're 50% qualified for. And I was like, that will never be me. And so I raised my hand, threw my hat in the ring, went through the interview process, and got the job at the end of the day. And so that was where, 2 years into my time at Visa, I went from managing our Olympic portfolio to managing our overall global sports portfolio.
Right.
And I share that just because I really want the young women listening to hear that, like, you do not have to have all the boxes checked to do the job. What you have to do is have a belief in yourself and lean into these opportunities that present themselves not very frequently, and know when those moments present themselves and step up to the challenge.
So let's elaborate on that, because I know you've been such a great mentor to so many people, but a lot of young women. And when you see them and when you talk to them and try to counsel them, outside of saying like, have confidence, go for these positions, what else, not mistakes that you see them make, but where else do you try to help them in terms of gaining that confidence to go for the jobs that they're qualified for and should be under consideration for?
Yeah, I mean, it's frankly, it's not dissimilar from the conversation I have with elite athletes that are transitioning out of their professional, athletic career into a sports, into a job. I think we're hardest on ourselves, and you've got to be really careful not to be so hard on yourself that you take yourself out of the running for things that you otherwise absolutely would be a candidate for. And so I always talk about identifying what your superpowers are, getting really clear on like what differentiates you from any other candidate, and leaning into those things. In any job, we all have a weakness, right? And you can hire for that weakness. Instead, lean into the things that like make you unique. And so that's my counsel to, young women coming up, young talent, male or female coming up, thinking about like, how do I keep pushing the envelope for where I want to go, for where I want to be? My biggest piece of advice is talk to people. There's, and in the spirit of Doug Purney, kind of, loan yourself out to sit in on brainstorms, because you never know what unique point of view you're going to be able to bring to a conversation, and where that will add value, and where things from there will just infinitely grow. So I think growth mindset is just critical in all of these things.
Well, there are two things there that I want to elaborate on. One, knowing you how long as I have, you've really been a connector and sometimes the word networker is seen as a pejorative. I don't see it as a negative. And so, you are a thread to so many people in the industry. And I guess my follow-up is, a second part is, don't you think there's some progress being made in the sports business in terms of women in positions of influence and authority and important roles comparatively when you and I first got into this business?
Absolutely. I mean, I literally just watched Serena in a box with leaders of industry who were all women, and not leaders of women's sports, female leaders in the sports industry. And there's a really important distinction there. Like, success for me is when you're on a panel as a woman talking about the sports industry, not on a panel as a woman just talking about what it's like to be a woman in sport, or a woman, or the women's sports space. That's what success looks like. So like Renee Anderson, right? COO of the NFL, CRO of the NFL. We've got Heidi Browning, CMO of the NHL. I mean, and then you've got Jess Berman taking the helm as commissioner of the NWSL. I mean, women are there now. Our job, and I will say, it's pretty wonderful to stand up there and see that all of a sudden now I've come to a place in my career where my peers are these leaders of industry. And I think we across each other definitely acknowledge that there is a role for us in bringing these younger generations up along with us. And so there's certainly a mentorship tenet, but what I always say, and it's what I did when I was retiring from sport and looking for where I wanted to go, informational interviews are like, networking can be an icky word. It's all about informational interview. It's about connecting to people, asking them questions about themselves, and trying to listen for, a story that you can hear in their journey, that can kind of help you connect dots for where you might want to go. And you never know what's going to come out of those informational interviews. So I always say it never hurts to ask the question of like, hey, could I get 15 minutes of your time? The worst thing they can say is no.
And I agree.
They're going to say yes.
Exactly. And you'd be amazed how many lifelong kind of relationships and friendships start out of just a simple 15-minute conversation. I'm sure there are many people that you keep in touch with to this day. I want to touch on a couple of other things, because in 2019, I believe, you did move over to Google, and I'm just curious how that job is different for you, and really what your skill sets are focused on now, as opposed to either being at the brand side at Visa or IMG Consulting.
Yeah. I was with our former CMO of Visa the other day, actually trying to explain this. The way I describe it is, you come from Visa, where, like I said earlier, the global brand was built off the back of these things. So, sponsorships, these integrated marketing sports partnerships were at the center of really the brand efforts that Visa made, for its many, many years and my time there. Coming over to Google, I always describe it as like Visa would have been one product area of the many that Google that I now kind of work across at Google. So at Google, it's consumer apps, right? Which is all the things that we would be familiar with: search, maps, translate, lens. There's P&E, there's hardware, there's cloud. The list goes on. And each of those product areas really does function as its own business and serves anywhere between 3 and 5 billion users, depending on the product area. So the scale is just massive. The singular business focus of each of those things does mean that from like the outside in, we think of Google as just one entity, but actually in that one entity, there are multiple product areas that each have their own line of business that they're focused on. And so my job is really, I mean, it takes a Herculean effort to create a red thread across how we're showing up in sport across all those different product areas. But also just how to be more efficient. I think for a long time, we weren't necessarily bringing together, for example, how we're showing up in media, how we're spending with the likes of a Disney, through the lens of all of our product areas, versus coming at it as one-offs within each of our product areas. And that's really the opportunity, and kind of not necessarily centralizing how we're doing it, but how we're thinking about it. And me bringing kind of a center of excellence mentality to the negotiations that we're doing with our partnerships, and then also just thinking about more holistically how we're showing up in sport.
Right, and so I was just going to say, for the listeners, it is focused on partnerships in sport and sports, and
Yep.
And that's got to be complex, and like you said, it's got to be, I think you said Herculean, in terms of connecting that thread, because it sounds like the size of Google is certainly different from most other businesses and industries partnering into sports.
It is. And yet at the same time, just in the last 3 years, where we've leaned in, for example, longer integrated marketing partnerships, giving ourselves time to learn and build equity in some of these relationships, versus doing kind of one-off activations within them, which is what we'd kind of previously been doing. That to me is like a real build for success in us, where we can start to figure out, okay, what is the innovation role for us in this partnership? What is the story we want to tell about our product area? So, we've got Google Pixel, right, in the NBA, thinking about what does it mean to be actually the fan phone of the NBA? How do we bring that to life? McLaren, and our Chrome relationship there, and Android relationship. We're getting better about, showing up and kind of doubling down year over year in these partnerships, but then also thinking about the larger business case for why Google should be in these things in the first place. The truth is, we don't have an awareness problem, so we don't need to be in these things for a brand lift. We're in here to tell an innovation story, and my push to a lot of the leagues, teams, federations that we talk to, they're kind of always coming at it through the lens of brand. And actually, I think the pivot is going to be for a lot of these tech companies is, what is our essential role that we're actually playing in this that helps us tell a better story about why this partnership makes sense? A lot of the partnerships don't make sense.
Or to your point, even helps the fan, right? Experience and consume sports. All of those things are pivotal for you, certainly not brand awareness. And, I think that when I talk to people who've known you over the years, you've mentioned a couple words that are pretty consistent to me. Relentless. I hear positive outlook. I hear enthusiasm when it's about Kate Johnson. And I guess certainly relentless and positivity are attributes you used in really fighting another part of your life in terms of you were diagnosed with cancer.
Yes, I was in May of 2021.
May of 21. Yeah. So first off, I'm sure for the listeners, how are you feeling and how are you doing? And really, how have you persevered through this?
Yeah, thanks. I'm doing well. I'm 4 months out of active treatment. I finished up at the very end of April. I came back kind of part-time for the first 6 weeks. And now I'm in what we call active remission, which is just about, keeping it at bay, making sure it doesn't come back. That's both, I look at that through medications. I also look at it through lifestyle, making sure that I'm putting all the things in place that will help me be successful in that, plant-based eating, nutrition, exercise, all of that. I'm kind of going back to my rowing days and pulling forward those things that we know need to be true to be your best self. So it shouldn't take cancer to do those things, but it certainly has been a wake-up call. I think the thing most recently, I was very fortunate. I got to speak on a panel with 3 other professional athletes who had fought cancer more recently in their lives. And we were connecting the dots between the role that sport has certainly played in our lives, just at large, but now pulling that through into cancer. There were so many moments, when I was in treatment where I was so grateful that I had this muscle around, knowing the power of as an example, the power of visualization. I would sit in the chemo chair and I would visualize the medication kind of smothering all the cancer cells, knowing how to advocate for yourself in a doctor's appointment. A lot of stuff comes at you really fast in a doctor's appointment. If you don't have kind of the muscle to slow down and advocate for yourself and ask the doctor to repeat things, to explain things, in more plebeian terms, that's something that I think sport gave me. That's not just a confidence thing. That's something that being able to ask the coach for clarity on technique. It's no different with your doctor. Why are we doing this treatment? What is this actually going to do for me? And so for me, it's been kind of I never asked for this, but it's definitely been a pivot for me now as I think about connecting the dots more publicly between the role of sport and athletics in life at large, from career all the way through to fighting kind of the unexpected. It's massive. I tell anyone, get your kids into sport if they're not doing it yet. Get them involved in something.
Well, I also think it's incredibly courageous and brave, and I just appreciate you speaking so publicly about it because, certainly is something that we can all learn from, and so many people are affected by it. And to see your relentlessness and positivity and using, I would say, the lesson and attitudes from sport to fight this is reassuring. So please continue to stay positive, stay relentless, because a lot of people certainly caring for you, okay, on that. And we mean that. So I want to end our conversation on the I Factor with some, I would call them our quick hitters, Kate, okay? So these are ones I'm going to touch on a couple of things. First, what do you look for in a hire?
Grit. I look for work ethic and grit and kind of outside the box thinking.
You can spot grit?
I can spot it really fast. And usually like the tenets of grit tie also back to, I can tell if they've played a team sport or not. Um, what I mean by that is like, for grit would be kind of thinking outside the box in terms of how they answer these questions, right? So they're not always going for like the cookie box answer. They've been able to show an example for where they've come at something through an alternative approach. And those are things where I just, whether it be overcoming adversity and bringing a little bit more vulnerability to the conversation, those are things that pull through for me when I'm talking to talent. Just where have you had to double down in life and prove out your grit.
A red flag in an interview?
My gosh, a lot of I statements, me statements versus talking about examples where a team came together to deliver on a certain outcome. Yes, as a hiring manager, you want to hear what that person's direct role was in something, but I'm also very clearly listening for how do they show up as a team player and how do they work well with others. And so too many I statements are a red flag for me.
Leadership in your mind, the attributes of a successful leader in your mind are?
Getting out of the way. Setting a pace that allows others to be their best. My job as a leader is to make sure that I feel the things from on high that could be distracting and keep the work moving, getting out of the way of the work, keeping it moving and making sure that I'm setting a pace that gets the best out of everyone. It's not about being the leader and being in front of everything. It's about, just making room for the employees to show up as their best selves.
I like it, getting out of the way. If you knew then what you know now, what would you do anything differently?
I don't think I would. I think I would. I think I would just keep up with that. I think I would have told my younger self when I was transitioning out of elite sport that, hey, these skills that you've learned as a professional athlete are absolutely going to serve you. So don't second guess your decisions. Keep trusting your gut and don't overthink things. I think I spent a lot of times kind of ruminating over decisions that I made. And in the end, just trust your gut. That's what I would always go back and tell my younger self.
I like that. I'm sure that you are asked often, my son, my daughter, my friend, my colleague, they'd love to sit with you and get your advice on how can this young person be the next Kate Johnson? What advice do you give to a young person looking to excel in the sports business?
Yeah, I mean, this one for me, it comes down to know thyself. And be true to yourself. I interviewed for a finance job, and a woman who interviewed me, everyone else was going to give me the job. This one woman walked me to the elevator and she said, I'm going to say that we shouldn't hire you because I can tell you're not passionate about finance. And so, she did me a favor there. I could have wasted 3 years in finance knowing that's not where I wanted to end up. And so I think a lot of times as young people, we want to get to the next thing really fast. And I think it's okay to give yourself room to let good things happen, for the unexpected to come in. We always want to know how we're going to get from point A to point B, especially when we're younger. And I think it's important for young people to leave room for the serendipity. And this comes back to my comment about do the informational interview, ask questions outside of yourself. You never know where those conversations are going to lead.
I love that she could recognize that you didn't have the passion in that, because to your point, she ended up really, it was a huge favor to you, right? Because you went and got the position that you did have passion for, and that led you on your journey. But love that one. Last question. Finish this question for me. The sports industry needs to do a better job of
innovating. It needs to stop resting on its laurels. I mean, I will tell you, I am very excited about the NWSL right now because I think it is in a moment in time where it's not held back by history and ways of doing things that are frankly becoming antiquated in terms of, how everything from rights fees are structured through to media, media deals. Like, I just think, in order to move forward, we've got to stop resting on our laurels and think that the old ways are going to serve us. Certainly working for a tech company, that's the push. If I end up kind of in these conversations with leagues, teams, federations, where just the same old thing is getting served up and it's not looking at what us as a client can offer uniquely as a tech company, the conversation's over. It has to be about innovation and moving forward into new ways of being.
Olympic athlete, Olympic medal winner, global sports marketer, and an SBJ 40 under 40 honoree in 2017. Kate Johnson, Thanks for being with us on SBJ's I Factor. Hope to see you soon in person down the road.
Abe, thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here.
Take care. We'll see you soon.
SBJ I Factor is presented by Allied Sports, a new agency model built to lead modern marketers in the shift from sponsor to storyteller.